It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. You know that. 5 teams, 7 years. You can check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Check us out at Ross Tucker Pod. And I've got not one, but 2 guests today. I guess actually I have a former co-host and a current co-host. So John Daigle joins me every week, as he always should, and we love. You can check him out on social media at NotJDaigle. Remember, he's at establishtheRun.com, a treasure trove of information, especially this time of year. Just use that code FEAST to get 20% off at establishtheRun.com. We're joined by my brother from another mother, Fran Duffy, who was the longtime co-host of the College Draft Podcast, worked for the Eagles for a long time. You can check him out on social media at FDuffyNFL. The truth is the Eagles have won the Super Bowl every year since Fran stopped working for them. And you can tell my Zoom popped up. So anyway, Fran, you look great, man. You sound great. I know you're doing all the stuff for the All City Network, but you could probably do a better job of explaining it than I can.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, the Eagles are officially undefeated in Super Bowls since I left. So you can thank me for that, certainly, if you're an Eagles fan listening to the show. But no, I was there for 13 great years, 13 great seasons. Now with All City Network, doing NFL draft stuff in all of the markets. So DNVR out in Denver, CHGO. We've got markets in Dallas and Phoenix, and obviously here in Philadelphia as well. And so it's been great being able to create draft content year round. Also still doing some Eagles coverage for our guys over at PHLY as well, working with Bo Wolf and Zach Berman.
Which is awesome. And we thought it'd be cool to bring on like a guy that's done all the reports, that's evaluated all these guys thoroughly, dug deep, and try to go a little bit deeper for our listeners and the people that check us out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL on YouTube, to try to give them a little extra value about some of these skill position player prospects, since this is a fantasy show. And I guess I'll start. Maybe John and I will just go back and forth, Fran, with questions. But my first question is this. I think it seems like Cam Ward is going to be the number 1 overall pick for the Tennessee Titans. I guess my question, Fran, is what would be your expectations for him as a rookie with the Titans, and in particular, running the ball, right? We care about quarterbacks that run fantasy football. We saw what Jaden Daniels did last year. Heck, quite frankly, and John was all over this during the season, we saw what Drake May was able to do as a runner and the impact that had. What kind of runner, for people that haven't watched him that closely, maybe they've watched more of the highlights, what kind of runner is Cam Ward? And what should we expect from him from that standpoint of his game? Maybe overall in general, but then as a runner in particular.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really twitchy athlete, extremely slippery in the pocket, and he can get out and create at a really high level. He's very comfortable throwing on the run. He's not always just looking to scramble when he takes off, but he certainly can make defenses pay. He's got 84 explosive runs over the course of his career. Now, obviously, this is a guy that started 57 games in his career, and so there's a long resume, a long runway there for him to create those explosives. But, you know, he had over 30 explosive runs this past year playing for Miami. He's a guy that can make defenses pay on the ground. You referenced Jaden Daniels. That was actually they're different players. I'm not saying that he's Jaden Daniels, but when you look at like the late game heroics, the ability to kind of put Miami on his back throughout the course of the season, to just kind of pull them out of the gutter and will them to victory. much like what we saw Jaden Daniels do at Washington this year. I think Cam Ward has a little bit of that to him. And so, and some of that happened with his arm and some of that happened with his legs. But he is a very slippery athlete. And, while I wouldn't say like, oh, yeah, he's going to be what Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels have been, Josh Allen, you mentioned even like Drake May. I think May is probably a decent comparison. They're built differently, but I think when you're looking at the impact that he can have on the ground, probably similar to what Drake May did last year in New England.
I want to continue along those same lines at the quarterback position because right now, I believe the second quarterback drafted on night one is wide open between Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and the public is not doing this, but I'm going to build off of my show and my mock draft that I did last week with Ross, and I'm also going to toss Jalen Milroe's name into that night one QB2 conversation. So can you tell us some of the strengths between those three players and what teams right now in the NFL are debating, given that it's wide open between who's drafted first among them?
Yeah, I would say, and we know how this goes, right? That how we feel about these prospects right now is going to change from a fantasy standpoint once we see landing spots. So, just looking at them all in a vacuum on an island right now, I would say with Shedeur Sanders, the best version of Shedeur is as a pocket assassin, right? Like that's to me like where he needs to get if he's going to hit his ceiling. He's not quite there yet, but if he gets there, I think he's got that ability. I made comparisons to Geno Smith back last summer. I think there's some Baker Mayfield there in terms of the play style and some of the pros and cons to their game. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at there with Shedeur. I do think if he were forced into the lineup early, that there would be very likely that there would be some bumpy roads there early on. But that would be something that I'd be fascinated to see what the supporting cast looks like, certainly with the offensive line around him. If they're able to protect Shedeur Sanders, I feel a lot better about what the early returns could be there. But he's not going to give you the same rushing upside that some of these other guys are. I think when you look at Jackson Dart, he has more of an ability to create with his legs. He does scramble at an extremely high rate. That's something that a number I've started charting over the last couple of years, looking at quarterbacks. It's not just pressure to sack, because that's been a pretty fair predictor in terms of moving forward into the NFL. We know that guys that get sacked a lot in college typically there are guys that get sacked a lot in the league, and that can lead to a very mercurial fantasy football player. And when you're looking at Jackson Dart, he did a decent job from a pressure sack standpoint, but he also scrambled at an extremely, extremely high rate. We have not seen a lot of those guys pan out. Now, the two guys that have, we've seen Justin Fields in recent years, and then Jaden Daniels. I mean, it was like 2/3 of the time he got moved off his spot, he was taken off and running. Now, those guys had elite athletic traits. I wouldn't say that Jackson Dart has elite athleticism, but he does have the ability to make you pay. I do think he can give you some scrambling upside. I would say similar to Drake May from last year, just kind of staying with that through line. And then when you look at Jalen Milroe, and I agree, John, I think when you're looking at Milroe, he accepted that invite over the weekend to go to the draft. That's setting off alarm bells for me. Like maybe he goes a little bit earlier than we expect. I don't know if round one's happening, but I think when you're getting into round two, it feels like he probably doesn't accept that invite unless he feels pretty good that he's going to hear his name called earlier than we expect. When you're looking at Milroe, he is the moldable ball of clay, only a 2-year starter for Alabama, but extremely, extremely physically gifted, rare athleticism for the position, legit like 4.3, low 4.4 speed. He's a special physical talent. Now you still have to mold around him from a pure passing standpoint, but I'll tell you what, like I his best football this year looked really good, looked like a first round pick. And so obviously it wasn't always there. Otherwise we would be talking about him consistently in that realm, but the tools are through the roof.
So, okay, I got several things to get into now after that. First of all, Fran, last week on this show, John, we did his mock draft, and he mocked the Pittsburgh Steelers taking Jalen Milroe with the 21st overall pick. I had not seen Milroe in a single first round anywhere until John did that here on the Fantasy Feast podcast. Next thing you know, Milroe's accepting an invite to the draft in Green Bay. So I don't know if they call that the Daigle bump or if it's a coincidence. It's funny just hearing you guys talk. It has occurred to me that it's actually a heck of a Jedi mind trick if you think about it, right? Like, on the one hand, you would think that they wouldn't offer him to come in the draft unless he was going to go pretty high. But if you're Milroe in his camp, it only takes one team, right? And there's probably people that like him in the third round, like him in the second round. Well, now that he's going in the draft, now you might be like, uh-oh, somebody else sees what we see. Somebody else wants to take him high round 2. We might have to go up to the bottom of round 1 to get him. I think there's a lot of different possibilities there as it relates to Milroe accepting that invite. And yeah, it might be an uncomfortable night for him, but it's the best business decision for him to accept that and have people wondering what the heck is going on. You know what, like, just how high are people on him? I want to be clear about something for him. So, is it fair to say, just quickly, is Cam Ward your top quarterback?
He is. Yeah, I feel pretty good that he's in a tier by himself.
Okay, all right. So, I want, because I haven't seen this elsewhere. Is Shador your second quarterback, or is there another quarterback? Maybe we already have mentioned it with Dart and Milroe, or maybe we haven't. Is there another quarterback that you think could be fantasy relevant next year that you really like that maybe we haven't mentioned, or is it Dart or Milroe?
Yeah, to me, it's Shador is in the next tier by himself. I do think that it'll take a little bit of time. I would say that behind him, I would put Shuck from Louisville and Jalen Milroe really quickly on Shuck. I think that he's your pure like drop back pocket passer type. Two guys I wrote down while watching him were Kirk Cousins and Davis Mills. I do think that's kind of the spectrum there. If you told me 5 years from now, 6 years from now that Tyler Shuck was the best starting quarterback from this group, I think that's within the range of outcomes. Obviously he's a little bit older. He's a seventh-year senior. He'll be a 25-year-old rookie. He's been in college for a long time. A couple of injuries that kind of derailed and extended that career, but I thought his film was as good as anybody this year in terms of just playing the game the way that we expect a quarterback to play. But I think when you factor in everything, that's why he's a little bit lower on my board, relative to Shador and to Cam Ward.
So I forget like what the most well-known drink is at the Masters. I do know this. If it has Smirnoff vodka in it, it'd be delicious. And Smirnoff vodka isn't going to cost you a fortune, which by the way is one of the things the Masters is known for, right? Like it doesn't cost you a fortune for the food and the drinks there. Huge fan of Smirnoff because they've been sponsoring our show for a while. They're the official vodka of the NFL. And they're my number one draft pick, with the draft being a couple weeks away. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. I'm telling you, Smirnoff should be your number one draft pick when it comes to vodka.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around Shuck backing up Justin Herbert for a couple seasons at Oregon. That's what always confuses me when I talk about him as a day 2 prospect. But since we only have you for about 14 more minutes, I do want to move on to the wide receivers because it is open as well. But let's start at the top in your analysis with Travis Hunter. It did seem initially before Colorado's Pro Day, whenever Travis Hunter was first being evaluated by NFL teams, they were certainly playing him at cornerback over wide receiver. But in the recent weeks, especially after the most recent report from ESPN's Adam Schefter that Hunter is not only likely, quote unquote, likely to go number 2 overall to the Browns, also the Browns are one of the few teams who have said they prefer him as a wide receiver. So your thoughts on Hunter at the next level?
Yeah, I did something, Daigle, that I've never done with a player before. We've seen some two-way guys come through college in the last 15 years as I've been writing prospects up, but none to the level of Travis Hunter. I actually wrote him up. Completely 2 separate prospects in my database. I wrote the cornerback report and I wrote the wide receiver report. Both guys are in my top 5 prospects in this class. I just think he is such a unicorn. I would say, as a receiver, I mean, his film, it's remarkable. Now, it comes down to, how set is he that he wants to play both ways full time? If he's going to play both ways full time, I think he has to be a quote unquote corner first, right? I don't think that he can go through offensive meetings through the week and, we're going to play 20 plays at corner. I think it has to be the inverse. Now, if he wanted to just play receiver, again, he would be my wide receiver 1 in this class. I think he would be worthy of a top 10 pick. In this class, I think that's worthy of a top 5 pick. And I think that, when you're looking at his game breaking ability, his ball skills, what he can do after the catch, I was impressed as a route runner. He looked like a future wide receiver 1 when when I watch him, especially given the low sample.
It's absolutely incredible. What about the next guy, Fran? Is there a, because it's funny, I thought it was T-Mac, McMillan from Arizona. Now I see reports where he's way down. I see other reports where Golden's up. My antenna is raised, Fran, because it feels like there's been a lot of movement with those two guys since they stopped playing football games. And you know how I feel about that.
Yes.
I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know what McMillan did. I mean, did he kill somebody? Like what did I'm joking, of course, but like what did he do? And I know what Golden did. He ran a really fast 40.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the end of the day, when it comes to like media rankings and things like that, a lot of times it can be people just watching more film and catching up. It could be influenced by the people that they talk to in the league. I will say, like, I've never been the biggest on Tetaro McMillan. Like, I think that he's been a fine player, a solid player, a guy that I was fine with in like honestly where we're talking about him in round one. That's kind of how I viewed him. I never viewed him as like quite like a top 10, top 12 type of selection. Even going back to last summer after that great sophomore season. And so to me, like, yeah, like that is not something that is completely surprising to me. The Matthew Golden love is a little bit rich. I think we're still talking about a third-year guy that has never been like the guy offensively. He was down the stretch for Texas last year. The next time you show me a clip where he looks like he's running 4.3 on film, that will be the first time I've seen a clip of him running 4.3 on film. That was one of the more surprising times in the 40-yard dash for me at the combine, but a really good player. Like I think a guy that can be a starting quality receiver, just not like the guy. And so if we're talking about him in the top 15, that is a little rich for me. For me, honestly, behind Travis Hunter, the guy that I get most excited about is Luther Burden III from Missouri. He was my wide receiver one coming into the year. I think even coming off last year where the production wasn't quite there, he just has dynamic qualities that I don't know that some of these other guys consistently have. And I mean like dynamic qualities on tape. He ran low 4.4s out in Indianapolis at over 200 pounds. And when you're looking at his athleticism, his explosiveness, his ability with the ball in his hands, he's a proven ball tracker down the field. It's not just like screens and gadgets. They threw him vertical routes and he was able to make plays on it. So to me, I look at Luther Burden. There is some boom bust there with the profile, but in a class that is lacking a lot of the quality boom players, I'm willing to take a risk on Luther Burden III.
And the Bills, Chargers, Cowboys, of course. There are some teams at the back end there who are certainly could squeeze in Burden, just trying to get his yak ability into their offense. I want to move on to running backs, though, because Ashton Jeanty, top 10 pick in my mind, in a tier of his own, somewhere probably number 6 to Raiders, number 9 to Saints, number 10 to the Bears, all live. Behind him, though, it's usually Amari Hampton, who is the only other running back considered to be taken and valued in the first round. Do you think Hampton deserves to be in that tier alone, or is there someone in your mind that also stands alongside him as that RB2 in this class?
Yeah, for me in this class, Hampton is in that tier by himself. Now, depending on who you talk to, you might get someone that feels Travion Henderson from Ohio State belongs in that tier. Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Quinshad Judkins from Ohio State as well. So I do think the depth at the top in this class is impressive. I just think that you have Jeanty, like you mentioned, I agree, top 10 player in this class. I think you're looking at Hampton. I think he's in that next tier and a first round pick. And I think when you look at the rest of those guys, I think you probably want them as more of the, maybe a lead committee type situation, or he's the 1B kind of situation, in a committee. So I think when you're looking at those guys, all talented players, and depending on landing spot, like that's going to change what the fantasy rankings are for them moving forward. But all of them kind of have their warts that to me like bring them down a notch compared to Omarion Hampton.
Fran, just you saying that leads to this question for me. You've been doing this a long time now. I know that you're into the fantasy stuff as well. How much of it do you think, especially early in a guy's career as a rookie, how much of their fantasy production do you think is the player themselves versus the situation? Because I'm thinking about Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton, and my question was going to be, how high is too high to draft Ashton Jeanty? And we're saying this before we even know where he lands.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, look no further than Saquon Barkley, right? We had this conversation last year, and it's like, all right, well, we know the pedigree with Barkley, we know the traits, but the production just hasn't been there on a consistent basis since his rookie season when he burst onto the scene with the Giants. And then we know the supporting cast was not always great, and so that's why, selfishly, I would love for Genti to fall a little bit, just to we can kind of, I want his best years to go to a good football team where he can play his best football and hopefully play, carry a team into the postseason. The higher he goes in the draft, the less likely that seems to be. Now, that said, the Raiders are trying to set themselves up to be that kind of team. Chicago, what they did with the offensive line this offseason, they're trying to put themselves in position to have that kind of success with the run game. So to answer your question, yeah, I do think that the landing spot has a huge impact. And that's why, honestly, the running back position overall, we can do a whole podcast on this, but that's why it's been viewed as such a fungible position because it is so focused on what that supporting cast looks like. You can insert another player in and get similar-ish type of results without having to make that same kind of investment.
Love Labatt. Love getting free stuff. They've combined two of my favorite things. It's called Buy Beer, Get Gear. Such a smart promotion, right? Just listen, you're buying Labatt Blue Light anyway, or at least you should be, okay? When you do it, just snap a quick photo of your receipt, upload it to rewards.labattusa.com immediately, and then check out some of the gear they have. I have a decent amount of it. It is awesome. Rewards.labattusa.com.
Speaking of similar-ish type results, I think initially when the collegiate season ended, Tyler Warren was everyone's clear-cut number one tight end. But recently, it's Colston Loveland who has also been teetering, maybe so much so that he could be the first tight end off the board on night one. So just talk about the difference in skill sets of both Warren and Loveland bring to the table.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at Warren, he is more of your traditional like Y type of tight end. Now he can move around. The usage with him was awesome in that Penn State offense, which I know Ross can attest to. But he is more your traditional size profile, 6'5.5", nearly 260 pounds. He's awesome with the ball in his hands. He is a dump truck in the open field. Not as vertically explosive as you would like. That would probably be my big knock. Put some balls on the ground. Not last year. Last year he was really reliable at the catch point in his highest volume year, but in years previous had some drops issues, not the cleanest route runner. So those would be the knocks for me. That's why he's like a tier below where I think Brock Bowers was a year ago as a prospect. But to me, I would be surprised if Warren was not the first tight end off the board. I do think that he's going to go in the top 10 when it's all said and done in this class. And then when you look at Colston Loveland, he is more in the Dalton Kincaid, Zach Ertz profile where he's a taller, longer, leaner type of tight end, more of your move guy. I do think that he chips in as a blocker, but nowhere near as effective as what Warren has been at Penn State. Obviously, in that Michigan offense, you've got to block, but I just don't think that that's a strength of his game. He's really good at the catch point, more reliable in that way. I do think he's got some juice after the catch, but not a guy that I view as like a true mismatch type. Some of the guy I mentioned, like Zach Ertz was never like, oh man, like you just can't guard this guy from an athleticism standpoint. He beat you because he was such a good route runner. I do think that when you're looking at Loveland, he does need to get a little bit better in that area, but I think that's the skill set when you look at the player.
Fran, we've seen recently, it used to be that rookie tight ends usually didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And now more recently, there have been rookie tight ends that have had successful years. Do you think Warren will merit because of where he's drafted? If he's going to be a top 20 pick, do you think he's a guy that can have a really big rookie year?
Yeah, I mean, it'll come to it goes back to your last question, Ross, about like the supporting cast and the situation. Like my gut right now says that he's going to end up being a New York Jet. 7 overall. They've got Garrett Wilson. We know that they're going to want to run the football. Aaron Glenn has talked about it wanting to be a committee backfield and use all three of those backs. So I think that the run game is going to come into focus. You have Garrett Wilson, who's your number one. And now you insert Tyler Warren as that secondary receiving threat. What do those numbers ultimately equate to? There's not really a high level of competition right now in that room with him. So I would feel like he would be the starter. But are we talking 3 to 4 catches a game. Maybe a little bit more than that. That's probably a win, right? From a fantasy standpoint, that might be like a low tight end 1, depending on what he can do after the catch and how they scheme him open and all that. So I think that will be something certainly to watch. But my guess is he will end up, if he goes to the Jets, I mean, he will be essentially the number 2 pass catcher in that offense, and that should result in some good fantasy production.
We only have a couple more minutes left with you, and this is a fantasy show, but I would be remiss if I did not ask you an Eagles question, since that's what you are locked into the most here. And at the end of the draft, one, I would like you to settle a debate between Ross and I. Are the Eagles thinking offensive line or front 7? And 2, what will the Eagles do in your mind on night 1 in general, given that they do have, not just this year, but over the next 2 drafts, 20 picks? They can't even fit these guys if they drafted all of them on their current roster. So what are they thinking of trading out for? What are they eyeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a safe bet to just say best lineman available. I think that's a best case scenario there. If you're Howie Roseman, if you're Nick Sirianni and Jeff Stoutland, I think when you're looking at that, it's O-line, D-line, you're pretty safe making that bet. My gut says that it would be more on the defensive side of the football. They just redid Lane Johnson's deal. He came out and said that he plans to play for another couple of years. He's still playing at a very high level. We saw them do that with Jason Peters, where he played very late into his 40s here in Philadelphia. So I think when you're looking at Lane Johnson, yeah, they want to continue to replenish that depth. They lost some of the key pieces, in the reserves there along the offensive line. So I would not be shocked if they spent a relatively early draft choice there. But I don't think they're going to necessarily shoehorn that into 32 overall. Now, that said, if a guy like Josh Simmons from Ohio State fell to them, if he was the best player, yeah, I think that would be the pick. But I do think it's probably more likely, given the loss of Josh Sweat, given the loss of Milton Williams, that they probably address the defensive line more so than the offensive side. I do think that, let's say, linemen aren't on the board and it's Malachi Starks that falls to them. And it's like, all right, he's the best player. We love this evaluation. We feel he's going to come in and start right away for Vic Fangio at safety. Then Malachi Starks becomes a Philadelphia Eagle. But, I think at the end of the day, safest bet, best lineman available.
Yep, and I think it'll be on the defensive side of the ball. I agree with Fran. You got to check him out on social media. He does an absolutely outstanding job at F Duffy NFL. It's got to be fun for you, Fran, to be going on different cities all around the country and talking about this stuff. John, of course, is absolutely fantastic. You can check him out at Not J Daigle. I can't highly recommend enough. By the way, John, you might be doing double duty next week because I might need to get you on the Even Money Betting podcast to go over the prop bets for the draft. There's nobody better, which is awesome. So check out Fran at F Duffy NFL. Check out John at Not J Daigle and use that code FEAST at establishtherun.com. It is an awesome, awesome place to get more information. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. Other than that, I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.